Greetings, Kratic here. You might notice a slight echo. That's because I have moved. Anyways, getting into this Typhon's Veil Frost Hydra speed build. Going to be a nice build for those quick greater S speeds, especially. There's less ramp up time than this build in particular as compared to, say, Vircentotto, but it clears at about the same greater rift as Vircentotto, maybe a little bit lower than the primary Vircentotto build without teleport, but if you're including teleport in the Vircentotto build, like a low greater rifting setup, this build will clear a little bit higher. However, it always will clear faster, a 2 to 4 minute clear speed as compared to the typical 3 to 5 minute of the Vircentotto build. So in that sense, this is a very nice setup to run for just gem ups and a distraction from Firebirds, to be honest. So nice build to run in season. Anyways, let's jump in. This is my preferred variation. Focus and Restraint with the Orb of Infinite Depth and the Tasker and Thea all coming into play in this particular build. It's just such a smooth setup. Offensively, this build will be more enjoyable to play. Granted, there are times when your Orb of Infinite Depth stacks go down, or you might not have your safe passage up for whatever reason, and you get insta-gibbed by spear throwers or a charger or a dangerous elite or something like that. Whereas if you were to run, I also really enjoyed this other variation, which was very consistent defensively. Unity, Tasker and Theo with the Winter Flurry. Now, this particular build, its downside was it's a little bit more inconsistent with its offense because you have to debuff with the Blizzard attack. There's more of an elite focus, you have more elite damage reduction, that sort of thing, so you can engage elites a little bit more readily, and indeed you want to seek them out a little bit more just because it takes so long to set up your damage rotation with the Blizzard Apocalypse that I quite enjoyed just running through the Rift and using the Focus and Restraint and Orb of Infinite Depth. So this version, just to give you an idea, you'll be able to go through the Rift at your own pace. You will kill more trash with this version, the Focus and Restraint, as compared to the Unity setup. But the Unity with the Blizzard and the Winter Flurry, it will be able to destroy elites a little bit quicker. It will be able to seek out elites a little bit quicker because of the wormhole and the extra mobility from Scramble. However, this particular build is no slouch either. Even though we have to slot the safe passage for toughness, it has higher cooldown. So you're less dependent on your illusionist for mobility, even though it is still nice to reset your teleport, right? It's definitely a very good setup for getting through the Great Rift as well with the higher cooldown. Alrighty, getting into the general build. So this will apply to both versions. You're going to be getting multiplier from the 6-piece of the Typhon's Veil. You're also getting multiplier from Focus and Restraint for this version, or Winter Flurry for the other version. So 2.25 for Focus and Restraint, or 2.5 with the Winter Flurry debuff. Orb of Infinite Depth, of course, is going to be 1.4 times multiplier. You have the Squirt's Necklace, which is 2 times multiplier. And then we also have the Bane of the Trapped, going to be very beneficial. So nice multiplier there. Enforcer, similar, very nice multiplier. Audacity coming into effect here to help us out. And then just in general, we have the Fragment of Destiny and the Serpent Sparker and the Magistrate, all 4 times, up to 4 times multipliers to enhance the damage of our Hydra. Notably, this particular variation has the Arcane Dynamo. And you may say, well, Kratic, you have a lot of abilities here that have to be cast. So there are certain instances in the Rift where you have to cast your Black Hole to crowd control enemies, or you have to cast your Chain Reaction just to maintain your Orb of Infinite Depth bonus, right? And this is true. But I would counter that with this particular version here doesn't have to cast Blizzard, so you're more free to cast your signature and generate more shielding through the signature attacks rather than having to juggle casting the Blizzard. Simply because Explosive Blast can be cast at the same time as our signature ability or at the same time as you're casting Black Hole, right? So it's a little bit more efficient in that regard. However, just know that sometimes your Arcane Dynamo will be soaked up, but that's okay because you're generating these stacks so much quicker than a Unity build. It just makes up for it and makes it a super smooth variation as well. However, if you want more control over your Arcane Dynamo stack generation, which does give 60% damage, by the way, I would advise running the Unity setup because you have absolute control over when you spend a 5-stack Arcane Dynamo. A general note for both of these builds is even though we have Arcane Dynamo in the build, that does not mean you have to enhance your Hydras every cast. I would say it's even more important to at least get Hydras up and running in the first place before you focus on enhancing them. That being said, so casting your Hydras first priority. However, if you're able to get at least one of your 2 Hydras enhanced with Arcane Dynamo, your damage does increase rather significantly. Positioning them in such a way that they can deal maximum damage with their cone, such as up against a wall or something, can be beneficial as well. The increased attack speed with these builds, with the Tasker and Theo, does help clear out the trash in the case that they happen to be attacking in the wrong direction a little bit quicker. So that's one of the reasons we're going that route. And one other thing to note is Pylons. Because the Magistrate is allowing Frost Nova to cast automatically, for both of these builds, a good method when you come to a pylon is to cast the Hydra at the base of the pylon ahead of time. That way, by the time you reach the pylon and click on it, the spawn will be frozen, and all the ads in the elite pack, they'll be frozen and they won't be able to kill you because both of these builds can be vulnerable if your Orb of Infinite Death or Halo of Karini is not active at the time you click the pylon. You will get killed rather quickly. So definitely try to do that. Of course, with this particular variation here, with the Black Hole, you can also opt to simply cast the Black Hole and then click the pylon, as this is another form of CC. As to shielding pylons, for the Unity build here, I would definitely consider not clicking shielding pylons, especially for lower density rifts and earlier on in rift levels especially. This is because the Unity build here depends so much more on the Illusionist passive to traverse the rift that it can be troublesome. Now that being said, if you do have a nice dense rift, sure, go ahead and click that shielding pylon. If you are near the end of your progression for the particular rift, go ahead and click the shielding pylon. The Focus and Restraint version has a little bit more leeway, a little bit more play because there is such higher cooldown. You get more standard resets to your teleport. It's a little bit easier to traverse a rift even with the shield pylon applied. So I'll leave it up to you whether you want to click the shield pylon with this particular build. I will say you still benefit from the Illusionist, but not near as much as with the Unity variation as far as getting through the rift. And this again is partly because we are using the Safe Passage rune on the FnR setup versus the Unity build, Unity+Karini, which will use the wormhole, right? Now, something cool to note, a cool interaction with Frost Hydra in general, is that Frost Hydra will be proccing your Bane of the Trapped at range because Frost Hydra will chill enemies with their cold attack. And this chill occurs before the damage instance. So even if you're slightly out of range of your Audacity, you will still benefit from Bane of the Trapped. We also have a lot of defensive possibilities here. Both builds run the 4-piece Typhon, which gives 80% damage multiplier remember when you're entering every rift level, you're going to want to, the first thing you do is summon those Hydras, because you need this toughness available, otherwise you'll get insta-gibbed, one shot, which is not good. Another important one for this particular build is going to be the Orb of Infinite Depth, and keeping up your safe passage every now and again is nice. Just know that earlier in the Rift, when your Gogok stacks are not active, you will be a little bit more squishy just because the extra dodge that you get from this gem won't be active as well. So it's a little bit, like I was saying, less consistent defensively as compared to the Unity setup, which has instead, defensively, we have Halo of Karini giving us that up to 80% damage reduction. I think the Halo of Karini is better during the Rift for consistency defensively, because you don't have to be near enemies to keep it up. However, it is a thorn in your side when you get to a single target Rift Guardian, because of Audacity, you're going to want to be closer up. However, Halo of Karini requires you to be farther away to proc this bonus 5-second duration before it expires, but even still, it makes it such that during the Rift Guardian fight with the Unity setup, every now and again you will have to teleport away and then come back in, detracts from your damage ever so slightly, right? However, benefit here with the Orb of Infinite Depth, of course, is you can stay nearby your enemies, so during the Rift Guardian fight, it makes it really easy. You just stay glued next to the Rift Guardian and you will win. I really enjoyed the higher cooldown with this build, so let's go over cooldown real quick. You're going to want, in general, with the Focus and Restraint version, Helmet, Diamond in the Helmet, Gogok with Swiftness. You want the cooldown from Paragon, and the Enchantress's Prophetic Harmony, which will give you an extra 10% if you have up to 25k int on your Enchantress. So at lower Paragon, we're running the 39.76 cooldown reduction, but at higher Paragon, we're running 45.78, which will be better for a Spellsteal setup, just resetting your Explosive Blast a little bit more. Trading off that 1000 int is well worth the 10% cooldown, in my opinion, once you get to those higher Paragons, where you can maintain higher int. Lower Paragons, you're going to need that int on the weapon, just to get higher damage, higher, toughness, that sort of thing. Anyways, like I was saying, we're running Absolute Zero at lower Paragons. That's just because I feel Absolute Zero is a little bit more beneficial, because you probably won't have cold elemental damage on your amulet at that point. So you only have 20%, and even though 20% is still higher than the 10% damage increase by skills category, we're only getting magic weapon here. I still think it's more beneficial to go Absolute Zero in this instance, because you get the double duration up to 10 seconds. And it's also, I don't know if it's a benefit or a detriment, but Black Hole Absolute Zero is static, meaning when you cast the Hydra, they will benefit from whatever amount of cold damage increase you had at the time. In that sense, you're always going to want to cast your Black Hole Absolute Zero before you cast your Hydra, so that they benefit from the elemental damage increase from that ability. Whereas with Spellsteal, it is perfectly fine to cast your Hydras and then cast your Spellsteal during your damage rotation, whenever the elites are grouped up well, whatever it is. Because this damage that you're getting, it's additive to the damage increased by skills category, but more importantly, it is dynamic in nature. So you're benefiting from it instantly whenever it applies, right? One thing, multiplier-wise, is you're going to want Hydra damage, skill damage. Notably, it is not being added in to your damage increase by skills category. It is a multiplier with this build, which makes it super important to get this affix on gear. So getting the source, the chest piece, and the shoulder piece with Hydra damage, skill damage, is really important. It's even more important than crit hit damage. So for the Unity setup, where you get up to 60% cold element by default because the Winter Flurry rolls with a cold elemental damage affix, it's very good in that sense, but it's also bad because it's really hard to get a highly rolled 150% Winter Flurry with both Hydra damage and crit damage on it. So if you have to choose between Hydra damage and crit damage, definitely choose the Hydra damage instead of the crit chance. Sorry. There. However, one benefit of the Unity setup is that you do get the crit chance on the amulet, whereas with the Focus and Restraint build, you'll notice I am running attack speed in that slot instead. So this build by default will lose out on 10% crit, which is okay because this particular build runs 24 FBA on the Hydra rather than the 30 that you would have on the Unity build, right? So going from 30 down to 24 is a 25% DPS increase. So even though we're losing the 10% crit hit chance, which is about, I don't know, 7.5%, 8% overall DPS, we are increasing our damage by 25%. And more importantly, it's the attack rate of the Hydras. Doing more hits per second means you're able to kill the smaller trash quicker, which is whittling them down is more important in my opinion, especially because this build has more attacks. Because we're focusing more on our signature attacks and we have more abilities that deal base default damage, it is more likely with this particular variation that we will generate Oculus ring spawns, right? So you have the Oculus ring on your follower, it gives a focused ring of power that gives you an extra 85% multiplier. Can proc these more often with this version rather than the Unity because we're putting out so much more just damage to kill little monsters. The Unity setup will have a harder time generating those Oculus ring spawns, especially notably, if you didn't know it, the Hydras themselves will not proc their damage. So when they're killing enemies, and most of your damage is coming from that. So Blizzard doesn't deal near as much damage as these other abilities, so therefore you will get less Oculus ring spawns. So this is another benefit of being more consistent offensively, even though like a spike of like 85% damage is obviously not consistent in that sense, but it's kind of a nicety of the build, I would say. Yeah. Getting back to attack speed, how we hit this 24 FBA is we're going to run attack speed on the weapon, both rings, the gloves, and the amulet. So it's very beneficial because you can drop up to 6% attack speed and still outfit all the pieces of gear in the build, which is really nice. It also means that if you do perfect these attack speed affixes on your gear, having max Gogok stacks will not be required, which is actually nice because during the Rift you will drop your Orb of the Depth every now and again, you will drop your Gogok stacks. So being able to ramp this up quicker and hitting the 24 FBA as soon as possible is very beneficial. Kind of something you can seek out to improve your gear later, but just getting it in place, you can run 5% on the necklace, you can run 5% on your tasker, right? And that's another thing is, at higher Paragons, you're definitely going to want to wear the Tasker and Theo to maximize your multiplier. However, at lower Paragons, most of the time, most players will want to just wear the Magistrate and then cube the Tasker and Theo because hitting these attack speed breakpoints is so important. Getting 49 or 50% on your Tasker is really important. Wearing a Tasker and Theo getting a Tasker and Theo in Ancient that is 49 to 50% can be very difficult, right? And you'll notice here that you are able to run crit on your Unity. That's because the 30 FPA breakpoint is a lot easier to hit. So you, like I mentioned before, you don't need the attack speed on the amulet. All you need is the gloves, the ring, and then the weapon, right? Defensively, we have affixes for percent life is going to be very important. Vitality is going to be very important because of our shield generation. Quick note on shield generation. We are dropping the galvanizing ward with this particular build because we can. Because we're focusing more on our signature attacks, we don't really need the galvanizing ward, which is important for this variation because you do need a second life passive. You have to run the attack speed on the Enchantress. From the Focus Mind, you cannot run her second life passive. That means the only place you are able to run it is in this fourth slot. So it's another nicety of the Focus and Restraint build, is that you get that. The downside is that you are more likely to need it in the first place. The Unity build, notably, has to slot the Galvanizing Ward passive here because we're not casting our signature as often. Ashnagard's Bloodblazer going to come into effect. The increased attack speed from the Shamadal Seer and the Fragment of Destiny is going to be huge for keeping our shield stacks large. Just remember as you're using this build that if you're casting something other than Barrier Blades, you will be generating less shield stacks. Because when you're casting Barrier Blades, you're generating the 4% there, plus the 4% from Deflection. Whereas if you're casting anything else, if you're casting Teleport, Spellsteal, Frost Hydra, Chain Reaction, or Blizzard, you're always only going to generate the 4% from Deflection. So just something to keep in mind if you try to balance casting those signatures and casting the other spells. Otherwise, you will break and your squirts bonus will drop. Defensive affixes. I was talking about life percentage benefiting your shielding. Vitality and life percent are going to be very important for this build. I'm going to recommend life percent on the shoulders, chest piece, the belt, and for the Orb of Depth version, you're going to want vitality on your helm and your source. Armor is going to come from the pants and the boots. The belt and the chest piece is going to be a large bonus. So here's what I recommend for this build. If you are high Paragon, if you find an ancient set chest piece, get armor and life percent and Hydra damage on it. Defensively, this is the best mix, and yes, you are trading off 650 int, but at higher Paragons, it's more worth trading off that like 3% DPS for the 5.5% toughness for this particular build, in my opinion. Lower Paragons, of course, definitely seek out int instead of armor on the non-ancient chest piece, just because you'll need it a little bit more at that point in time. So you'll go int life percent Hydra instead. Another thing that's notable for the Unity variation, you won't have the extra vitality from the source. You won't have room for it, so we are investing a little bit more vitality from Paragon. You'll notice 300 here as compared to the 200 points, Paragon points, that I invest for the Orb of Infinite Depth FnR setup. Anyways, that's my overview for the Typhon's Veil Frost Hydra Speed Guide. I would recommend one of these two builds. I tested a lot of variations. If you're wondering, I did test Convention of Elements. I tested Focus and Restraint without Tasker and Theo. I tested, oh my goodness, I tested the Captain Crimsons, the Aug Hills. I tested almost every variation I could think of for DPS, damage, toughness, and these two particular builds in a solo configuration, solo setup, were the most efficient. So that's what I'm here to tell you. Anyways, hope you have a good day and take care.